Welcome, viewers, to the masterful Austrian raceway, and to a race between a rally-modified Pessima, a street-tuned Pessima, an original Burnside V8 Super-matic, and a modified Burnside V8, known as the lead sled. And to be honest, I'm not expecting much from this race, since the rally Pessima will obviously beat the street Pessima. The V8 Super-matic won't beat either of them. And the stack of tires that mark the finish line is faster than the lead sled, but we shall see, as these races always seem to find some way to make themselves interesting, no matter how predictable they may seem to the uninitiated viewer.
I still want to know how the lead sled even qualified to race at all. It's insanely slow, heavy, and underpowered. I mean, it's so terrible it can't do more than 2 laps without melting its own brakes until they drip off the car and we have to scrape them off the track. Yet, somehow he is here. And he is not even in the lowest seed. Despite not really being able to complete the dirt time trial without the league installing a limiter on his car to keep him from just spinning off into some trees every time he tried to take the slightest corner.
Though he did struggle greatly on the dirt time trial, he had a road time that was at least moderately respectable, being mainly held back by his thin tires, which were very clearly not designed for performance driving, or rain driving, or anything other than sitting still and looking pretty. But, other than that, he is a decent racing vehicle.
He's about as qualified to be a racing vehicle as you are qualified to be an Olympic marathon runner, not that either of those things wouldn't be endlessly entertaining to watch.
This is why we allow cars like the lead sled to race in the Beam Racing League, because they are entertaining to watch and make races more interesting, as well as allowing those who do not have highly modified and specialized racing vehicles to enjoy racing just as much as everybody else. Let's go back Totti race, and talk about the fact that the Pessima street-tuned has kept up with the rally Pessima quite well, though he has not been able to actually make up ground, and does appear to be losing ground very slightly, though not nearly as bad as the two 1950s cars, both of which are falling behind very rapidly, and, as we expected, are experiencing trouble related to brake heat, most likely due to their weight and the fact that they both used drum brakes, which makes absolutely no sense, but that's the 1950s for you, I suppose.
Actually, those brakes are overheating because they are from the 1950s, and cars from the 1950s are terrible compared to modern cars, or cars from the 90s or 80s, or 40s, or 1895, or just walking through the Arctic, in your underwear, while trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, with your eyes closed. And about that Pessima rally, which has the unquestionably worst paint job PF anything ever. I mean, I've seen caves with better paint jobs done by cavemen. I hope it crashes terribly and burns into a thing, just so nobody has to suffer that awful, painful paint job anymore.
The 1950s is often considered the golden age of motoring, and it produced many of the most well-liked classic cars of today, including the Burnside V8, which we are watching right now. And the Pessima is sponsored, which is partially why it has such an odd paint job, but it does have a decent color scheme and asset colors, and it looks quite good actually. Not that it actually matters in the context of the race.
What do you mean it doesn't matter, you moron? Looks determine the winner of a race like this, obviously.
Well, ignoring him and his idiotic theories, let's talk about the vehicles in this rather unique and surprising race a little more deeply, starting, of course, with the two Pessimas, in first and second place respectively. The Rally Pessima is one of the best vehicles in the lineup this year, getting a top 5 seed and one of if not the fastest time on the dirt time trial. Which makes sense, given that it was a professionally modified car designed specifically to perform at its peak on both the road and the dirt, and to be a grippy vehicle with excellent handling, allowing it to put down its power better than other vehicles that may technically have more power and torque, as well as other paper advances. One of this should really be a surprise, but what is quite surprising is the performance level of the street-tuned Pessima, which managed the top 10 seed and, despite a very poor launch, has generally managed to keep up with the rally pessima, though I doubt he would perform as well on the dirt, but this does serve as proof that the pessima is one of the best platforms for turning. Despite, and perhaps because of its origins as an economy box designed for the person who never goes a mile an hour over 60 and looks to save every cent possible in nearly every area of their life. Now, the two Burnsides, on the other hand, are both in the bottom 10 cars this season and have both proven why in this race, as they fail to keep up, struggle with brake heat and, in the case of the V8 Super-matic, general engine heat as well. This is mostly due to their high weight, as a result of a steel body, their use of drum brakes, for some unknown reason probably related to their age, and their low rev limiter and general low horsepower and torque numbers, all of which is compounded with their thin, white wall showroom tires which were probably never meant to actually see the road, more or less be abused on a racetrack like this. At this point in the race, both of these vehicles are battling to survive and remain on the lead lap, as they probably will for many of their races this season, though all hope may not be lost. As their high weight and far above average damage resistance, both owing to their steel body, to give them an above average ability to fight off vehicles trying to pass them. Assuming they can hold an inside line, which can be extremely difficult without extremely effective brakes, which both these vehicles lack. And it appears that, while I was giving an insightful look into the vehicles of today's race, their advantages and disadvantages, what makes them interesting, and their chances both in this race and in later races, David has become bored and fallen asleep, which, at this point, shouldn't surprise me or anybody else, given his track record so far. And I will wake him up later. But for now I'm going to talk about the fact that the Burnside V8 Super-matic appears to have just suffered total engine failure as a result of overheating, which is very interesting, given that its radiator had sustained no noticeable damage, nor had any other part of the vehicle, with exception for the headlight. But that doesn't seem like it could cause an otherwise perfectly fine and functioning car to overheat. But it has died and is now in the middle of the straight stretch for the lead sled to crash into, which it appears to be about to do. This could be a turning point for the lead sled, as it will overheat very quickly if it sustains radiator damage, though it does appear, now, to have avoided that, or just traded it for a different problem, namely that its front bumper is now dragging along the ground, throwing up sparks, reducing grip for the front wheels, and making braking more difficult, as well as possibly some engine damage, though we cannot tell from here. Now, with that out of the way, we better wake up David so he doesn't sleep through the entire race. David, wake up David, we have a race to commentate.
What? I'm awake. I was not asleep at all, very awake and alert. You were asleep, you moron. Now, as I was saying, the Pessima Rally and the Street Pessima thing are both impossibly ugly and the two Burnsides are both impossibly slow, and this race is garbage. You should all go home now. Come back next week and watch the number 1 seed race on this track, and kill everybody.
You absolutely, painfully, world record-breakingly useless waste of breath. Just go home and take a nap and let me finish off this race. Just because it will be much easier if I don't have to try and make up for the absolutely stupid nonsense that seems to spew constantly from every surface of your body. Now, let's talk about the possibility that the Rally Pessima is going to lap the lead sled by the end of this race, a possibility which is increasingly likely as the race continues, and is only made more likely by the current state of the lead sled, though the Rally Pessima only has about 30 seconds before the race is officially on its last lap, which means that, if the Rally Pessima wants to make the pass, he needs to make it very soon. The lead sled really needs to prevent this pass from happening, because, if he can prevent it, he will get 2 points just for finishing the race, which is quite good, for a car like this especially. Well, it looks like he hasn't managed to prevent the pass, and won't be getting any points for this race, all because he couldn't manage to hold an inside line. Probably because its front bumper is being slowly shaved off onto the track and its tire down extremely thin, which does not help offset the weight of the car even a little bit. This means that both Pessimists will be scoring quite high for this race, and both Burnsides will be left without points despite the lead sled finishing the race and the V8 Super-matic not taking any damage prior to overheating. This fact does a lot to tell you just how out of their element both of these cars are on a racetrack against modern cars, and really makes me question why these two owners chose to use these two cars to race, instead of buying something, almost anything else. Since almost anything else would be better than these two cars, as evidenced by how thoroughly they were beaten by the two Pessimists in this race. Moving back to the race, we are now officially on the last lap, and the Rally Pessima has pretty much won. I hope you have enjoyed this race and were not too painfully put off by co-worker stupidity. Return to this track next week to see the number 1 seeded car's first appearance in a race, and find out whether or not his time trial results hold up in an actual race, or if he ends up just among every other car. Goodbye.